Welcome to Cracked Open, a podcast about life, love, loss, and the truths we discover along the way. Together, we'll explore the struggles that shape us, the lessons we carry, and the hope that keeps us moving forward. This is more than stories. It's honesty. It's healing. It's real. Let's get started. And now your host, Glen Nunes.
Hey, this is Glen Nunes, and welcome to Cracked Open. And before I get into today's episode on waiting, I want to briefly share something that happened to me today that really mattered to me. I received a message from a longtime friend, Gilly, and Gilly reached out to me after listening to a recent episode and told me that I met him right where he was. He gave me permission to actually share his name. I usually don't mention names on here, but I called him back, and after talking to him, he asked me to please use my name. I said, okay, I want to honor that. It's a reminder of why this podcast exists in the first place. Sometimes you don't realize the impact of your words. Sometimes it's just speaking from where you are, from your own struggle, your own questions, and somehow it reaches someone else exactly when they need it. And that's very humbling. And it's motivating. So today, we're going to talk about waiting, what it is, what it isn't, when it's wisdom, and when it's fear, and why so many of us feel stuck in the silence between knowing what we need to do and actually doing it. So let's get into it. Waiting reveals what we're really trusting. And this is why waiting is so dangerous if you don't understand what kind of waiting that you're in. Because waiting doesn't just pass time. It shapes you. It either deepens you or it hardens you. And his message stopped me cold because without even trying to, he described exactly what waiting had done to him. Waiting always leaves a mark, and nobody comes out unchanged. Sometimes waiting builds patience, sometimes it builds resentment, sometimes it quietly convinces you that this is just how life is now. And this message perfectly captures what happens when waiting goes on too long without hope. And as you listen, don't just hear his words. Listen for what waiting has been doing to him. I want to explain why I shared Gilly's text in the episode. He said when he reached out to me after hearing the depression episode, he said that he was in the waiting period, not the breakdown, not the breakthrough, but the waiting. That's why I added it, because it was in my head, and that's where so many of us live. We're not falling apart, but we're not healed either. We're not where we were, but we're not where we're going. So we're in that truck, alone, thinking, listening, and waiting for something to shift. And that's why his message mattered. Because waiting isn't passive, it's emotional, spiritual, it's exhausting. And sometimes just knowing someone else is sitting in that same space, it keeps you from giving up. Because waiting builds you, it tests you, it reveals you, and it can cost you. It can cost you a lot. I asked Gilly if I could actually read his text that he sent me at 7 o'clock in the morning. And this is exactly what it said, and he's allowing me to share this with you. Hey Glenn, it's Gilly. Something very strange happened to me. I've been going through a lot of stuff lately, but keeping my head above water has been a struggle. Here is where it gets weird. For some odd reason, you've been on my mind, and for the life of me, it just didn't make sense. I do know I wanted to call you, but life seems to always get in the way, and life has a way of throwing detour signs at you, so your current thoughts seem to take a back seat. On my way to work, I felt I needed a word of hope and optimism. So I put my CarPlay on to look for maybe some podcasts to help me deal with some stress I'm currently going through. I used to mock people that were negative. Anyhow, back on track. As I searched the CarPlay app for a podcast to start the day, maybe an inspirational or motivational pep talk to get me out of my funk. I clicked on a podcast. It was called Cracked Open Season 2. Where the F have I been? Episode 4. Well, here I am, sitting outside my work in Middleborough, my truck running as I sip on my coffee, tears pouring down my face as I just finished listening to your podcast. I feel like I'm back on track. I went through a few really tough months. Forcing myself to go to band practice, the fire to play was just a smoldering piece of wood of what used to be a blazing bright flame for the desire to play. That's the only thing I must say that saved me, was that smoldering, almost completely out flame that gave me the will and smile with zero negativeness that I fight now to get back. Glenn, that damn podcast moved me in ways that you could only imagine. I would love to be a guest on your podcast for whatever topic you feel fit. I don't want to press you at all. It's not my motive here, I promise. Can I call you sometime? We should catch up. Talk soon. Gilly. So when this number came across my phone, it was a random number. I've never seen it before. It wasn't the number I had programmed in my phone for Gilly. So with all the scams out there, I just wanted to make sure I had him call me. And he did call me back. And I had that conversation with him because I was just having a conversation with somebody else about somebody that randomly said, oh, somebody just called my phone or texted my phone from some random number and they're looking out for me. Look at this. Which was a complete scam. It was probably them from a burner phone thinking people are stupid, and sent himself this message to make it look like somebody else did. Because if somebody's going to send you a message from a random phone, they're going to tell you who it is, then they're going to answer it and say, this is me. The point is, there's a lot of scams out there, and I just wanted to make sure, because I have this stalker punk that's been following me, I'm thinking maybe this person is playing games with me. I don't know. This is what I was thinking. And all that being said, there's 4.5 to 4.6 million podcasts in this world. And this guy's in his truck and he types in motivation or inspirational. And out of all these podcasts, my podcast, which doesn't have my face on it, it's just my hand holding this black stone heart. And he clicks on it. And then he notices my name. And he's, wow, this guy has the same name as my buddy Glenn. And then he starts listening and he says, I hear your voice and I'm just blown away. This is him. Can't make this stuff up. What Gilly was really describing wasn't the situation. It's what happened inside him while he waited. And that's the question waiting always asks us. Is the season refining me or is it slowly draining me? That's what unmanaged waiting does. It doesn't just delay answers. It reshapes your expectations. And the longer you stay there, the more normal the pain starts to feel. And that's not just a story. That's a warning about the cost of waiting too long in the wrong place. Okay, so waiting is not passive. It's not weakness. Waiting is what happens when you want to move with every fiber of your body, but you can't. Because waiting is waking up and knowing what you want, knowing who you love, knowing what feels right in your heart, and still being forced to sit in the space between desire and fulfillment. It's the space where answers don't come quickly, where clarity feels delayed, and where silence just feels loud. People talk about faith like it's confidence, but real faith is endurance, because anyone can believe when things are moving. Faith is believing when nothing is happening. Silence is the hardest part, though. It's not the loud moments, not the arguments, and not even the pain. Silence. Silence is the absence of resolution. It's the quiet after the call ends. It's the room with no TV on. It's the moments where all distractions are gone and the only thing left is longing. Silence forces honesty. You don't get to hide in silence. You don't get to perform. You don't get to control the outcome. You just sit there, loving, hoping, praying, waiting. The Bible doesn't pretend waiting is easy either. Paul didn't pretend strength meant he could handle everything. We were under great pressure, far beyond the ability to endure, so that we would not rely on ourselves but on God. That's a quote from Paul. Waiting strips you of self-reliance. It exposes how little control you actually have, and that's why it hurts, because waiting feels like loss before anything actually is lost. It feels like trusting without leverage, like loving without guarantees, like believing without proof. And yet, this is where faith becomes real. Not when prayers are answered and not when doors open, not when nothing moves and you still don't walk away. Waiting is where pride dies. It's where humility deepens, and it's where God becomes your only anchor instead of a supplement. You're going to all these other things. This is when it really makes sense. People say God is working in the silence, and that's true, but it's incomplete, because sometimes God isn't working on the situation. Sometimes he's working on you, teaching you patience when you want action, teaching you surrender when you want certainty, teaching you endurance when you want relief. And waiting doesn't mean you're forgotten, and silence doesn't mean abandonment. It means that you're being asked to trust without timelines, and that may be the hardest form of faith there is. So if you're waiting, really waiting, if the silence feels unbearable, if hope feels heavy instead of light, you're not failing. You're being formed. I've read a lot on this and the biblical teachings on it, and sometimes when you're in this waiting period, I call it the waiting, sometimes things, say it's a relationship. We'll go into a relationship and waiting. Sometimes one of you or both of you aren't ready for reconciliation, or if it's not reconciliation, if it's separation or saying goodbye, whatever. Sometimes one person's not ready, the other one is. Sometimes both are, but sometimes both aren't. And it's all God's timing. You will know when you're both complete, because sometimes he's saying, no, you're not ready yet. And it's very hard to deal with. It's a vital, intentional period of developing character, and that's what he's doing. In the Bible, waiting on the Lord is an active, hopeful, and purposeful season of trusting in God's sovereignty rather than a passive pause. It is viewed as a form of worship that builds character, strengthens faith, and aligns personal desires with God's perfect time, and often serving as preparation for future blessings. And there's a kind of silence that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from waiting for a call, waiting for clarity, waiting for someone to choose you, waiting for something to change. And the silence gets loud, not because nothing's happening, but because everything is happening inside you and nowhere else. So today or tonight, whenever you're listening to it, I want to talk about waiting, not the cute inspirational version, the real one, the one that stretches you, exhausts you, and quietly steals pieces of your life if you let it. Waiting is not passive procrastination. Real waiting, a good waiting, it's an active, calm endurance of things outside our control while we stay focused on what is within our control. But here's the truth most people don't want to hear. A lot of what we call waiting, it's just fear in disguise. Waiting for the perfect timing, waiting for perfect feeling, waiting until it feels inside, waiting until it feels safe, or waiting till something happens, or waiting for someone else to make a move so you don't have to. That's not wisdom. That's resistance. And while we're postponing life just keeps moving. Good waiting is not hoping things will magically change. Good waiting is accepting reality as it is while knowing that you've done your part. It's allowing emotional chaos to settle so that you can make rational decisions. It's maintaining dignity, virtue, and inner peace while circumstances unfold right in front of you. But bad waiting is when you know what needs to be done and you delay it because it's uncomfortable, because it's inconvenient, because it might hurt. That's not patience. That's choosing comfort over courage. And there's a name for that hesitation. It's called resistance. Resistance, I'm going to do a podcast on resistance in the future. It's on my list. But resistance doesn't scream. It whispers. Not yet. Tomorrow. Just wait a little longer. Or maybe this will change. Or maybe I'll do it then. But tomorrow is the lie that buries the person you were meant to become. Because every time you postpone an action, every time you wait for better timing, you hand over a piece of your life to that voice. And it keeps adding up. It's just going to keep adding up. And you don't feel it all at once. You feel it as exhaustion, as anxiety, as regret, all these things. But that gut feeling, it never goes away. Life doesn't pause for convenience. It doesn't give you clarity before action. Sometimes you have to act while your hands are shaking. You just have to do it. You go back and listen to my podcast on Make the Move. It was probably my favorite because we really have to make moves in life. And go back and listen to that if you haven't listened to it. It's episode 3 of season 2, I believe. Let's talk about chaos. Chaos is not distraction from the path. It is the path. Peace doesn't come from waiting for the right decision to evolve. It comes from making the right decision. And if you don't move, you blink and years are gone. I've read up on this, and I hope this doesn't happen to you. I hope you're not in a position where you feel stuck and you're trapped or whatever. Don't let years go on. It's just wasting precious time. Opportunities are gone. Blessings are gone. And after all you're left with is this question: what the hell was I waiting for? Here's an analogy that I just was speaking to my buddy about the other day. about a certain situation. You have a lighter in one hand, okay, and you have a firecracker in the other, and you're looking at the wick, and you're sitting there waiting. You wait. The spark is right there. The fire is right there. But resistance tells you not yet. And the longer you wait, the more power it has over you. And what happens is the longer you wait, that firecracker evolves into a stick of dynamite. And then after that, it evolves into a bomb. And then it evolves into an atom bomb. And it just keeps getting bigger and bigger until one day you light it. And when it goes off, you realize you could have done this a long time ago and it would have just been a firecracker explosion. Now it's just a bomb going off and you've had enough. And it does happen. We all know it. When someone's pushed in the corner or when you've had enough. I'll just leave it at that. You know what I'm saying, when you've had enough. And wise truth says, you are not what you say you'll be. You are what you do. We lose days to indecision and we lose years to hesitation. Momentum is the only thing that creates change. It opens doors that you always knew were there, but you were afraid to touch. The greatest mistake in life is believing you have time. We all believe it until we don't. And if you have that key, if there's a lock on that door, the door might not even have a lock. You might have the key in your hand and you're just not putting the key in that door and you're the only one with that key. Or you have the trump card in that game of cards and you're just not using it. Most emotional exhaustion doesn't come from what happened to us. It comes from what we tell ourselves we're going to do and never do. Waiting doesn't resolve everything. Sometimes it makes everything worse. One bad choice doesn't disappear. It multiplies. And suddenly you're trapped in something you knew deep down was wrong from the start. And you were just seeing where it went. And you can go back into the grass is greener syndrome if it's a relationship, and if it's a job, it might have been you cheated to get that promotion, or maybe you cheated on a test. But like I said, if you feel trapped and you knew deep down something was wrong from the start, waiting didn't protect you, it buried you. And there's a moment, it can happen anywhere, at work, at dinner, and talking to someone who isn't really there. And suddenly you just see right through everything. Someone might be talking to you. It could be your mom. It could be a coworker. You could be at a restaurant. Who knows what it is? You could be staring at the TV and you're just looking right through everything. And suddenly you see right through everything. You stop waiting. You say, you know what? This is what I want. This is what I need. This ends now. And you're going to, whatever the situation is, you're going to make that move. And when you finally make that move, the weight lifts instantly. And not because it's easy, but because it's true. And when you hear that analogy about 1,000,000 pounds getting lifted off your back, that's what it actually feels like. It's an incredible feeling. Now listen, waiting isn't always wrong. Sometimes things are worth waiting for. Waiting for emotions to settle. Waiting to act with dignity. Waiting so you don't burn something down you might have to walk back through. But waiting when your soul is screaming, that's betrayal. Inner peace is worth more than being right. Your time is worth more than maintaining a situation that's draining you. And sometimes the smallest movement, it breaks the biggest spell. So plant that flag and say, I am not waiting anymore. Later sounds harmless. It gives comfort, it gives space, but later is a fantasy. You would never promise later. And what we really fear, it isn't death. It's wasted life. So ask yourself, who are you really waiting for? What are you really waiting for? What am I really waiting for? Why? Just sit back and take a pause right now and actually think about that. What am I really waiting for? That's the question. Discomfort can be a gift, but fire can also be a gift. Life is a one-time unfolding in real time. Stop hiding behind potential and step into responsibility. Waiting can be wisdom. Waiting can be poison. Only you know the difference. Okay? If something in you knows, if your gut won't let it go, stop waiting. Make the move. And go back and listen to that podcast. I keep saying, I kept catching myself saying this the last couple of weeks, and I would look at my friend. I talked to a good friend of mine, Chris, a lot, and I keep telling him, here it is again. I say, make the move. I said it again. So waiting can be preparation. Waiting can be also avoidance. The danger is not waiting, it's lying to yourself about why you're waiting. Let's talk about waiting versus silence. They're not enemies. Silence is the environment and waiting is the experience. So at this point of this episode, this is where we deepen. Waiting is strange because it feels like grief, but nothing has officially died. There's no funeral, no goodbye, no finality. Just absence with hope still breathing. And this is crucial because people confuse waiting with giving up. And it's not erasing desire. It's choosing not to weaponize it. So you still want, you still love, you're just not forcing movement. So we got to really talk to ourselves about this, pray on it, and we have to meditate or whatever you have to do. You really have to think about what waiting really is and how important it is. Because humility doesn't end when pride breaks. It deepens when control is removed. Waiting is humility without applause. No one sees it and no one rewards it. Silence removes the distractions. It removes performance. And silence leaves you alone with God in desire. It gives you time to really think. If you are going through a heartbreak or you're going through a tough thing, if you don't accept everything that's happened and try to analyze everything, you might have made mistakes. They might have made a mistake. Who knows? Whatever the reason is. But you have to sit back and think, and you have to analyze, and you have to deal with the grief. If it's real grief, you just deal with it. And then you make better choices. Because when you don't, here we go, back into rebounds, which is coming up. We have a podcast coming up about that. You jump into distractions and you start making bad choices, and then they snowball. Then you feel guilty. You feel like, maybe I got this far, or maybe for whatever reason, you feel like you might have done something, and now you feel guilty, and you're trying to justify the guilt by saying, I can't do this now because I did this, or whatever the reason is. I think if you're in that position, because everybody's situation is different. Every situation is different. We all have our own. I have my own. I talk about my own personal beliefs and my own personal experiences on here. I do listen to the sermons on Sunday at church, and I read the scriptures, and I study, and I watch podcasts, and I listen to people. I do take all your advice and your comments and all the DMs I get and all the messages. I know I quoted Gilly's today because after talking to him, he asked me to, but I get a lot of messages like that, and they're all encouraging, and that's all great, and I take it all in, and I appreciate everyone. I really do, and I want to build this podcast to make it positive, and all the stuff that I get and the input, it's just helping me. It's helping me polish these. I think I have over 20 under my belt now, and I think they're going very well. I think they get more interesting, and I'm feeling them more, and I'm doing a lot of topics now off my heart and what's on my heart. And I do have a list. I can list the list right now. It's a very long list of ideas and things I want to talk about. And these topics vary from everything you can think of, but this one that we're talking about today, waiting, it's broken into two types of waiting as we were speaking about it, and you got the good and the bad waiting. The one that you have to make a move and you're in a terrible position or doing something you're not supposed to, and you have to get out of that waiting period at some point. That's the bad waiting. That's just prolonging blessings and just making things worse. It's passive waiting, the kind that slowly erodes you. It sounds like, maybe they'll change, or maybe I'll just hang on longer. Maybe I'm supposed to tolerate this. Maybe suffering proves loyalty. This kind of waiting, it avoids hard decisions, it avoids boundaries, it avoids truth, and it keeps you stuck. It's waiting around something. It's not faith. It's fear dressed up as faith. And maybe you're just a selfish person, I don't know. And you don't realize that there's consequences in waiting sometimes, and it's not just about you, but others around you. Maybe you should just look back and see what you really have done to others in waiting periods, because some people, they name street signs after them, and they don't think about others. They just only think about themselves. Every situation's a sacrifice to them only. But that will come back and bite you in the you-know-what. Hopefully that's not you or your situation. There is a difference between waiting because you're afraid to move and waiting because God is forming you. One drains you and the other one builds you. One keeps you small and the other one makes you stronger. One is attachment and the other one is alignment. In the good waiting, God's waiting, that even though it seems really tough, his timing is not our timing, and delayed waiting stretches the heart in ways nothing else can. It exposes fears we didn't know we carried and forces us to confront doubts that we hoped would never feel. Yet, even in the silence, God is not absent. There is a sacred work happening in the waiting, a work that often goes unnoticed because it happens within our soul rather than around us. When life is comfortable, we rely on what we see, but when we walk through hardship, we learn to rely on God and who God is. The struggle shifts our dependence from circumstances to faith, from control to surrender, and from fear to trust. That shift, it's not easy. Some days you feel strong and confident and certain that God is working everything for the good. And then you get the other days, discouragement creeps in quietly. It whispers that nothing's going to change. But you're being refined. You're being prepared. And that's the biblical waiting. Ask yourself this in both types of waiting. Is this waiting producing growth, or is it producing anxiety? Is this waiting making me stronger or smaller? Is this waiting aligned with truth, or is it just avoiding reality? I had to ask myself, am I waiting because I'm afraid to let go of a situation I'm in, or am I waiting because God is forming something in me? You can believe in reconciliation and refuse to tolerate disrespect as well. Those two things are not opposites. Waiting on God does not require accepting humiliation, because biblical waiting isn't sitting in suffering pretending it's holy. Biblical waiting is preparation. When God made people wait in Scripture, it wasn't to torture them, it was to transform them. The wilderness wasn't punishment, it was training. Biblical waiting is not passive. It's refining, strengthening, clarifying, aligning, preparing. Abraham waited, but he was walking. Joseph waited, but he was developing. David waited, but he was being shaped in caves. Moses waited, but he was being stripped of his ego in the wilderness. They weren't just sitting around hoping. They were being formed. So biblical waiting is not, I hope this works out. It's, God, if this is for me, shape me for it. And if it's not, shape me for what is. Something powerful about biblical waiting. When Jesus said, peace, be still, he didn't just calm the storm, he confronted fear. And sometimes in the waiting season, that's what God is doing. He's not stopping the waves immediately. He's strengthening the person in the boat. Psalms 27 says, wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart. That means waiting requires courage. Isaiah says those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. And that means waiting, when done right, doesn't destroy you, it develops you. But here's the danger. Waiting can build you or it can paralyze you. Waiting on God is trust, and waiting out of fear is avoidance. And that's the difference. Sometimes waiting is done in the middle of a raging sea. You may be waiting for a breakthrough, maybe a job, a healing while your circumstances feel chaotic. It could be a relationship. It could be something with your family. It could be tons of things. But saying that, Jesus often calms the storm, but sometimes he calms his child. Peace, be still. It's a command over your inner fear, not just your emotional situation. When you feel overwhelmed in the waiting, sometimes waiting means that we need time to just finish the work that God has called us to do. We are waiting on God to fulfill a promise while we are in the middle of this fight. So God hears the voice of the person. This demonstrates that God is sovereign over time and will halt the universe to fulfill his purpose for you. He has a plan for you. So you have to ask God to give you the time and the strength that you need to complete the task before you, rather than just waiting for the battle to end, because it's not going to end on its own. And a couple of scriptures I'll end with. The biblical part is Psalms 27:14 says, wait for the Lord, be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord. Exodus 14:14 says, the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. And my favorite one, I had to say this one. Psalms 46:10. It's one of my favorite scriptures, and I know a couple other people, it's theirs as well. Be still and know that I am God. Sometimes we just have to stay still and wait. This is the good waiting I was talking about. Sometimes it's God telling you, wait, I have your back. Because some examples of biblical waiting is David was anointed and then he waited for years. Abraham was promised, And then he waited decades. And Jesus was silent before the cross. Waiting is God's favorite way of separating calling from timing. And faith doesn't promise outcomes, it promises presence. Having faith doesn't predict the outcome. You have to believe. Jesus says, ask, seek, knock. But the real important thing here, when we're talking about this topic of waiting, it's about who you are while you wait and who you become while you wait. Because me, in the last 7 months or so, I've had major changes in my life and a lot has happened. And I've become such a different person. And through the waiting, I've mentioned this to a couple of people in the past few months. I'm talking about my personal life now. I'm not going to get into any of my stories and go down any rabbit holes here, but if I could take what I've learned and who I've become because of all what I've been through and the massive amount of pain and stress and everything I've been through, to get the knowledge and who I am right now, I would do it again and again. It's easier said than done. So what I'm saying is sometimes we have to go through really tough times, but in the end, the blessing is worth it. And you are just being formed into who you were supposed to be by God. And whether you believe that or not, I do believe that. So as we move on here, I'm going to get into a little bit how people escape waiting and how rushing creates regret and how premature movement can ruin what patience could save. And not blaming anybody, no blame here, just wisdom. Loving someone while waiting is choosing to love without control, without ultimatums, without pressure, and no force, just presence and truth. Waiting doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means something is happening in you. Okay? So take a pause. It's a lot to take in, but waiting is such an important thing. Like I said, this one just fell on my lap too. It wasn't something I had on my list. Something was put on my heart and I decided to sit down and just talk about this. Waiting is what happens when you want to move every fiber of your being in, but you can't. We talked about that earlier. It's waking up, knowing what you want, knowing what your heart is anchored to do, and knowing what feels true in your bones, and still being forced to live in space between desire and fulfillment. That space has a sound. It's called silence. And not the peaceful kind, not the kind that presses on your chest, not the kind that fills the room when the TV's off or the phone's quiet and there's nothing left to distract you from what you feel. Okay, it waits. It means something's happening. So if you're waiting, really waiting, if the silence feels unbearable, if it feels heavy instead of light, you're not feeling, you're being formed. And when that time comes, whether the door opens or closes, you're going to walk away steadier, wiser, and intact, because waiting doesn't weaken you, it just prepares you. And sometimes the deepest work happens when nothing moves, but everything changes. It's about how hard waiting is. Waiting is the in-between season, not who you were, not who you were becoming. It's the hole where you're in between rooms. Waiting hurts because it combines two things the human nervous system hates: uncertainty and lack of control. Okay, so sometimes I add songs pertaining to topic I'm speaking about for the week, but before I introduce the songs, there was this one video that I watched, and it was a gentleman who had a heart transplant, and he witnessed the fear of death pretty much. But anyway, he was talking about his time in rehab, and he said a few things that I wanted to quote. One was, criticism can be good and bad, but not all criticism is valid. He said this is coming from a guy that nearly died from a heart attack and a heart transplant. One of his physical therapists said something to him that hit him hard. He was struggling this one day and he didn't want to do anything, and the therapist sat beside him and said, I know it hurts, but life doesn't get better if you just think about it. You have to act, and that's so true. It's not okay to do nothing. You have to get in the ring and fight. You have to fight it out, and don't wait. Take action. Don't give up. Try stop accepting what you don't deserve. It's not the critic that counts. It's the person who fights. And another thing he said was the credit belongs to those who stand up and fight and do the right thing and make the move, even if you fail at worst. If you fail, you tried. Those who don't try, wait, or act will never know neither the victory nor defeat. And it was a quote that he was talking about from, it's a more accurate quote. The way he said it was from Teddy Roosevelt. But he also said, you are beat when you refuse not to get back up, and you can win. And he went into a really crazy story about his situation. And all I'm trying to say is waiting is just wasting valuable time. Sometimes it's bad waiting. And the longer that you wait, the heavier it gets, the harder it gets, and the more difficult it will get. And I'm not saying pressure yourself. I'm not saying add more stress to yourself, but I'm saying this. The weight will fall off your shoulders. And that tight feeling in your chest where you think you're probably having a heart attack or you're not sure what it is, or you might be saying, I don't know what's wrong. That is your body telling you enough is enough. Make the damn move. Stop waiting. It's inevitable. And do the right thing and stand up for yourself. And no matter how hard it is or how difficult it's going to be, it's probably one of the most important things that you will do in your life in the present. And whatever reason you're in the waiting or struggling with this waiting period, you have to remember it's your fault and no one else's. You put yourself in this position. So you have to be honest with yourself. And a lot of what we just talked about, good and bad waiting, frustration, faith, impatience, music has been saying this for decades. So I wanted to share a few songs that capture the tension of waiting from different angles. Whenever I'm in a season like this, I don't just turn to scripture. I told you I do research. I also turn to music because songs have a way of saying what we don't always have the words for. And these songs tell a story of waiting in a way that, hits differently. So waiting shows up everywhere, like I said, in scripture, in relationships, and even in the music we grew up on. So if you listen closely, these songs aren't just love songs, they're waiting songs. So the first song I want to introduce is Tom Petty's The Waiting. It focuses on anxiety, impatience, and emotional struggle of anticipating a major life change, romantic outcome, or dream, emphasizing that anticipation is often harder than the action itself. It serves as an optimistic anthem about enduring, having faith, finding strength in patience. The chorus serves as a personal anthem for patience when faced with delays, whether in daily life or a significant life milestone. And the next song is Tired of Waiting for You by the Kinks. The song expresses weariness, impatience, and frustration with a partner who's constantly late or unreliable in a relationship. Written by Ray Davies, it features a repetitive structure that mirrors the feeling of being stuck in a stagnant, unfulfilling relationship rather than a typical love story. And Brad Paisley's Waiting on a Woman. It's a sentimental country ballad about embracing patience and devotion in a long-term relationship. It tells the story of an old man sharing his wisdom with a younger man about how waiting for his wife. The final verse suggests the devotion continues beyond death, with the husband willing to wait for his wife in the afterlife. And Right Here Waiting for You by Richard Marx. It's an emotional ballad about intense longing, devotion, and pain of separation in a long-distance relationship. The song promises unwavering loyalty, stated that no matter the time, distance, or heartbreak, he will be right here waiting. And the American songwriter is talking about this. When I say a long-distance relationship, he's meaning that he's not with her and it just feels worlds apart. That's what it meant by the long distance. So the American songwriter said it was the most significant song he's ever written, and it was while he was waiting and he was separated from his girlfriend. The next song is Waiting for My Real Life to Begin. It's by Colin Hay, an artist I really love. It's about the universal human tendency to put life on hold while waiting for a better future, ultimately urging listeners to break this cycle and live in the present moment. It reflects on overcoming past struggles and finding contentment in the here and now and making the damn move. And as I close, I want to say this: not all waiting is the same. There's good waiting, the kind where God is shaping you, refining you, protecting you, and teaching you patience and trust. If you're in that kind of waiting, my prayer is that clarity comes, peace stays, and you don't rush what's still being formed, because that's what he's doing. He's forming you. But there's another kind of waiting, and this one is the dangerous one. I talked to someone recently who's living in a prison in their own home, not physically locked in, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually trapped. It's beyond toxic. It's heavy. It's draining, and they know something has to change, and they know they have to get out of it. That kind of waiting isn't obedience. It's fear, because if you already know what needs to be done, Waiting doesn't protect you. It prolongs the pain. It makes the ending harder. It stretches the suffering longer than it was meant to last. So here's the real question that I leave with you. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting because it's a season of preparation? Or are you waiting because you're afraid to take the step that you already know you need to take? One kind of waiting grows you. The other kind weighs you down. Ask yourself honestly which one you're in. Here's the question again. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Ask yourself that. Okay, but before I close here, I want to just take a moment and I want to just pray. I'm going to pray now. So God, we come to you tired, honest, and open. Some of us are waiting for answers. Some of us are waiting for peace. Some of us are waiting for courage. You see every heart listening right now. You know the battles that we don't talk about, the silence we sit in, and the weight we carry while we're trying to do the right thing. You read our hearts and our minds. You know everything. Give us wisdom to know when waiting is necessary and courage to move when waiting has become fear. Help us to act with dignity, to speak with truth, and to choose peace over chaos, even when it costs us comfort. Remind us that we're not alone in the waiting, and that you are still working even when it feels quiet. Please give us clarity, give us strength, and give us the courage to make the move when the time is now. So, Father God, waiting is one of the hardest places to live. It's not the storm, it's not the victory, it's the middle. It's the space between what was and what could be. It's the silence between prayers and answers. It's the tension between hope and heartbreak. So, Lord, teach us how to wait the right way. Not waiting in bitterness, not waiting in fear, not waiting in obsession, not waiting in pride, but waiting in trust. Some of us are waiting for healing. Some of us are waiting for reconciliation. Some of us are waiting for clarity. Some of us are waiting for a door to close so we can finally move on. And God, sometimes waiting builds us. Sometimes waiting protects us. Sometimes waiting reveals things we couldn't see before. But other times, waiting can become an idol. Waiting can become denial. Waiting can become avoidance. And waiting can become self-destruction. So, Father, give us wisdom. If we are supposed to stay, give us peace. If we are supposed to move, give us courage. If we are supposed to let go, give us strength. Help us not to confuse patience with paralysis. Help us not to confuse faith with fantasy. Help us not to call something waiting on you when you've already given us the answer. For the ones who feel forgotten in the waiting, for the ones who feel like time is slipping, for the ones who are tired of hoping, meet them here. Build endurance, refine character, and protect their hearts. And if what we're waiting for isn't your will, remove it, even if it hurts, because we would rather be aligned with you than attracted to something that's breaking us. Teach us to wait in a way that grows us, not in a way that destroys us. In Jesus' name, amen. If today's episode spoke to you, I encourage you to sit with it. But this episode, I want you to really ask yourself that question. What am I waiting for? Some waiting refines us. Some waiting traps us. Only you know the difference. If this helped you, please consider subscribing to the podcast, sharing it with somebody who may need it, or leaving a comment or a review. And maybe as what Gilly said in the text I read you earlier, if it moved you, like the depression episode moved him, then I would say share it with somebody. It might help somebody, and that's what this is all about. And on a final note, waiting can build you, but waiting can also cost you. It can cost you time, it can cost you opportunities, it can cost you peace, it can cost you stepping stones that were meant to move you forward. It can cost you love, real love. There's a difference between waiting in faith and waiting in fear, and there's a difference between patience and paralysis. Sometimes God asks us to stay, and sometimes He asks us to move. And sometimes the very thing we're calling waiting on God is really us being afraid to take the next step. Don't let waiting become an excuse, and don't let waiting become denial. And don't let it cost you the very life that you're praying for. If you're in the waiting season, ask yourself honestly, is this building me or is it breaking me? If today's episode spoke to you, I encourage you to sit with it and ask yourself honestly, what am I waiting for? What the hell am I really waiting for? Some waiting refines us, some waiting traps us, and only you know the difference. If this has helped you, please consider subscribing to the podcast. It really helps and I really appreciate it. Maybe share it with someone who may need to hear this, or even leave a review or a comment. I appreciate it. And anyone that's new here on the podcast, I appreciate you checking it out, and welcome, and hopefully you'll subscribe and keep listening. And thank you to everyone else who continues to listen, support me, and share the Cracked Open podcast. So remember, your integrity is your legacy. Treat others as you want to be treated. And remember, karma has no favorites. God has no favorites. This is Glen Nunes. I love you guys. I'll see you next week on Cracked Open.
Thank you for listening to Cracked Open. If today's episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who might need a little light in their own dark season. Remember, even in brokenness, there's beauty waiting to be found. Every crack is a place where the light can shine through. Until next time, stay true, stay hopeful, and keep your heart open.